It is the biggest sporting event in the Twyford calendar. In fact, it is arguably the village's most spectacular annual extravaganza. I am, of course, talking about the first Twyford Scout Group Donkey Derby, which this year takes place on the 15th of June. And what better way to celebrate the 100th episode of the RG10 Podcast than taking a deep dive into this beloved institution. I've been speaking to James Pennington, the event's master of ceremonies, the voice of the Donkey Derby, if you like. Here's our conversation. Okay, picture this then, is a scenario for you. Just imagine that there's a foreign tourist who happens to be walking through King George's Field on the 15th of June, and they see, this palaver going on, if you like. How would you explain what is happening?
I think the best way to sum it up is it's some good family fun, which is open to everybody, and it happens to have some donkey racing. And the donkey racing is open to those who are eligible, 10 to 11, and we run a minor total on that, so we're not really. It's just a bit of fun to see who would win, and we have local charity stalls around the side and a few vendors, footfall of maybe a couple of thousand people, and a fair. So it's just a bit of good old fun, hopefully in the brilliant sunshine.
The donkeys themselves, perhaps the most important part of the whole day. Where do you get them from?
So we had an upgrade a couple of years ago. We've got a different supplier, which from Weston-super-Mare. And why do I say an upgrade? Somebody might say actually all of the fun is gone now, because the donkeys now turn up with their own with a saddle per donkey. So we're no longer finding young people actually fall off the donkeys. Previously, they were riding on the donkey without the saddle, and they're so well trained that they know when to stop at the finish line, which makes it a little bit harder to then judge who's got over the line first, because the donkeys know where to stop exactly at the end.
Are they bred for racing?
No, but they'd be typically in Weston-super-Mare, they would be taking children up and down the beach. And then in the winter, they'd be at a farm somewhere eating the grass and enjoying themselves. So they are used to carrying young people.
They have a pretty decent life. So the donkeys themselves, when they arrive, I presume they arrive in the morning. Do they stay overnight?
No, we had a little bit of a close call last time because the M4 was closed, and they literally got here about 1:10, and the first race was 1:45. And because they were traveling, we couldn't necessarily get hold of them. So it's like, we have got a mobile number this time, but they were just in the wrong spot. It was literally around Reading Field, but it was closed. So they had to go right the way through Reading.
Now, how do you spot a winner? What are you looking for when you're looking at the donkeys before the race, if you're thinking of putting some money on?
If you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been more, the winner would have been more about the rider and which rider could actually stay on. And if you ask me now, it's a little bit more difficult because they're so well trained. It's not easy to tell, because they can get to the finish line and then one of them can just have that little bit of a giddy up and get over. I think maybe it's more about the rider than the donkey.
Which neatly brings me on to talking about the riders. And we focused on the donkeys, the riders themselves. I presume they don't come all the way up from Weston-super-Mare. Where do you find them from?
Right, so that's more of a case of if young people get the parents' permission and are eligible in terms of the age range, and unfortunately it has to be weight as well, then they're able to. It's first come, first served. And what we do to encourage volunteering, because we're very keen on having volunteers help us, is volunteers get first dibs for their young people to actually be donkey riders.
What would you say makes for a good jockey?
I think in this instance, it's just having patience. You'd asked me 3 years ago, it's the ability to clamp your legs and hold on. And the real difference, a saddle makes a big difference. And to be fair, we kit everybody out in body armor and helmets, and then they each of them have different livery in terms of a color and a number, so you can spot who the runners are.
Have you ever had any controversies? I presume there are people judging who gets over the line first.
We do. So there's about 3 individuals who help judge who comes over the line. And the difficulty is now that the donkeys know where to stop. And literally what we've got is a piece of string going across the course, and the donkeys know they need to stop there. So they begin to slow down just before the line. And that makes it that bit harder to do the judging.
Have you ever had any kind of big issues where you'd been, where you'd really needed a photo finish, or there's been, some raised eyebrows at the final decision?
Kind of, but because I'm the MC on the day, what I've learned to do since is I just wait till I get given the answer, and then I reconfirm the answer before I announce it. And that way I don't get it wrong, which I did about 5 years, I think, get it wrong once.
You mentioned the betting earlier on. Tell me, how does that work? How does that operate?
It's really quite straightforward. I think last year it was 50p a time, or we raised it to a pound a go. It's a very simple tote in terms of what it is, of which the winner takes a certain percentage, or the winner, which is split by the number of people who've betted on the donkey. And there is a small cut which goes towards the scouts and the charity as a whole.
We haven't talked yet about the history of the event. Tell me a bit about that, how it started, how it's been throughout the years.
This is our 30th official event this year. Now, it's been going up. I think we've done more than 30 because some of them we probably haven't counted properly in terms of when we've done. And it's certainly more than 30 years because we had a gap for COVID. And we had, when we first started, some years where we didn't do it.
And how important is it as an event to Twyford Scouts?
It's a way for Twyford Scouts to actually give back to the community. So for us, it's not about the fundraiser. It's actually a way of giving back to the community. We're not actively going out of our way to do a big fundraise from. We've dropped years ago actually having people at the sides of King George Field to actually take an entrance fee. Decided that wasn't worthwhile, and it's become such a community event and a popular event that we want to run it, but we're not really trying to create a large fundraising surplus or anything else.
Finally then, I guess the most important people involved in this are the people who give their time to make sure it all happens.
Completely agreed. From that perspective, it's a real big thank you to everybody involved in scouting, because whilst they might not always be involved on the day, the amount of lifting or help they do beforehand, it's a team effort. And we're very lucky we've got an active group at the Scouts and a good parent support as well in terms of that. And it goes beyond just the scouting group. If we look at the local community and the support we get for the programme, it's great. I've already filled the advertising within the programme we've wanted to without really having to try too hard. Which is wonderful to actually get that level of support from all of our different sponsors. And then finally, it's a thank you to everybody just turning up. It's kind of known now that the donkey happens without really having to advertise the dates or put it up. And people know when it is and word percolates. I think it's now embedded within the community, which is great.
James, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
That was James Pennington, MC for the Twyford Donkey Derby. Thanks for listening to what has been the final episode of this series of the RG10 Podcast. We'll be back in a few weeks for Series 15, so do get in touch with the RG10 magazine if you have any ideas for future episodes. Until then, goodbye.